Hey, welcome back, all my right thinkers. Thanks for tuning in and check out your boy P Farm thinking right out here in my lab. When I'm in the book, we doing Q&As. I got a nice little question for you today, so let's go. Rightism, 25 rules to live by. Storytelling, story with a message. There's a message in my stories for life. I give life lessons. You tune in and receive it. I appreciate you. We got a good thing going. Let's do what we do. Right thinking mission is to enlighten, inspire, educate, and motivate you, the individual, to a higher spiritual level of enlightenment. Right thinking way of life through mental and spiritual discipline. Practice daily will help and guide you to obtain your goal of reaching spiritual enlightenment, aka to know thyself. My mission that all right thinkers know thyself. If you're a right thinker, your goal is to know thyself. You see where we're going with this? Let's get that together. So I asked the question, do you know you? You will when I'm through. That's what I do. It's rhetorical, but if you don't have an answer for yourself, tune in. I got you. A person who knows not and knows not that they know not is foolish. Disregard them. A person who knows not and knows that they know not is simple. You can teach them. That's why I do what I do for you. Appreciate you too. Stay tuned. I got more for you. A person who knows not and believe and think that they know is dangerous. Avoid them. I do. A person who knows and knows not that they know is spiritually asleep. I can awaken them. I'm your spiritual alarm clock here to wake you up with knowledge of self. That's what I do for you. A person who knows and knows that they know is wise. Follow them. All these persons reside in you. Right thinkers, know thyself, and to Maya be true. We in part two of the Q&A into the book of civilizations, now about contributions to civilization. Good question. This one is it not true that Africans were responsible for their own enslavement when they sold other Africans to the Europeans and the Arabs? If this is true, then why would blacks in America want to associate with their so-called African brothers? Another question, good concept or good question. So let's see what the answer for that is. On this side here, we got a guy named John Armand. Okay, this guy right here. I'm gonna tell you about him. He got a little history. I'm gonna tell you about him right quick. And speaking of slave trade, we're gonna go over that right quick too, because they got some false concepts about that we're gonna clear up with this answer. John Armand, he was a Negro known as Mungo John, and he was a mulatto trader and was the principal slave trader in West Africa in the late 1700s. Armand, who had inherited vast territory from his African mother, a prominent chief, was educated in England, so he had a little knowledge. Arriving in Africa in 1758, he at once raised the price of slaves from $50 a head to $60 a head. So he increased the price of slaves, okay? And a wholesale from $50 to $60 a head wholesale. Mungo, on the slightest pretext, he would send his soldiers to raid any native village. One of his employees was a guy by the name of Reason Bowie, a white Texan. Is that name Bowie? Okay. And the father of the celebrated Colonel James Bowie, the hero from the Alamo and the inventor of the what? The Bowie knife. Okay, the Bowie knife, whatever. Bowie, David Bowie, remember him? I thought that, but it wasn't him. It was the Bowie knife. So whatever that was, he was the guy. All right. So now the question was, did we responsible for our own sin? And this makes more sense. Listen, there is not a race of people who have not had their, we call them Judas if you're Christian, Benedict Arnold if you're American, at some point in time where what? Even the Africans were no exceptions. Slavery is as old as mankind as and prostitution. In what many ways, in many instances, slaves were either prisoners of war. Again, they didn't sell their own people. If they conquered prisoners of war, then y'all the first to go ahead. Take them. We don't need them. Yeah, take them, okay, for profit. Traders were prisoners of war, criminals, okay, or people who were unable to pay their debts. So the word slave was coined in Europe, and it describes the Eastern Europeans who were enslaved by their Western European cousins. Sound like white on white crime, right? Moving on. But many African nations also enslaved their prisoners of war, but they still respected the humanity of the enslaved individuals and that they were often allowed to marry and their spouses and offspring remained free. So they had some kind of empathy towards them. So they wasn't just like a lot of we hear about how bad they treat them. So I ain't saying there was no good slave, but they saying some of them was okay. But various religious conflicts have also played a major role in what? The history of slavery. Remember, the Pope okayed it, okay? The big boys okayed it. So the Hebrew, this is where I got a problem right here. The Hebrews was subjugated by the Europeans. No, they wasn't. No, they wasn't. Being a historian and know that's a lie. I can tell you that right now. So, but the Romans, they persecuted what? Christians, and both Christians and Muslims enslaved what? They're prisoners of war during hundreds of years of conflict. If I get you through war, you become product, concubine, whatever you want to do. But you don't mean nothing to me. You the first to go. So I understood that concept. So it wasn't like they just took their own people, put them in. No, they didn't do that. Get an understanding, please. Stop running up at the mouth, something you don't know. Talking about. But the enslavement of what? African people was profoundly different. Simple as that. We were considered what? Objects to sell and buy. We wasn't considered humans. Okay? They were enslaved by Christians. Ding, 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 ding. And in the Bible, it tells you to obey your master. Not your God master, but your slave master. So why would you follow that book? Again, Muslims and Jews for what? Religious and financial reasons. Y'all want to make money. Y'all use us to make money. Simple as that. And whatever capacity you use, it still was to what? Benefit and make money. So the enslavement of African people by non-African people. Stop right there. Stop right there. You didn't enslave your own people. No, you enslaved the African people, and it was based solely on race and greed. It has been suggested by some historians that the Africans who sold their prisoners to foreigners were not aware of the horrific fate that awaited them. We didn't give a damn. Hey man, take them. I don't know what's gonna happen to them. Don't care. If they're here, I might kill them either. I might use them in slave or whatever. But yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen to them. But they didn't send their family members, their loved ones over there to my land over there. No. Come on. And first of all, enslaving anybody is not good. Whatever the color, don't make a difference. But other historians have noted that what? Africans knowingly sold their enemies for profit. Yeah, they ain't denying that. I understand that. I ain't got a problem with that. I just told you, if I win you or if I conquer you, you become an object. I can dispense with you for profit. That's what they did. Or enslave you for profit. They did that too. Okay. But in the end, Jews never were enslaved by the Egyptians. Even those who portrayed their fellow countrymen, sellouts, were ultimately enslaved themselves. See, never worked. How about this? I just listened this morning. Burkina Faso, they bringing back the death penalty. This guy had 20-something attempts on his life. And the ones who was doing it, they pretty much got away scot-free. But if they killed me, I'm dead. And no, we stop it out. Anybody caught treason, we killing you. I love that. I love that. Why? Come on, man. Stop thinking you can do something and get away with it. No, it's going to cost you your life. And sometimes in addition to 30 grand. It's old hustler's right. But regardless, again, regarding the disharmonious relationship which is said to exist between what? The Africans and African Americans. That was by design. This whole concept of selling your own people to slavery was by design to keep us from uniting, becoming one against him. The old divide and conquer from the inside. One would do well to remember the strategies. What I just tell you, divide and conquer. You got 54 continents on the continent of Africa, 54 countries. If you can split them up, you ain't got to worry about them. The white man been doing that for hundreds of years now. We see that. Now it's starting to come to a head. It's not working no more. Why? Because we figured out what your strategy is. Divide us. We got to what? Unite. Just like ignorance, to defeat ignorance, what? Knowledge. Dark, light. So light. So you got to give the opposite of what you're going against. So now they figured out if they keep us divided, we never win. But if we unite, he can't win. Let's go. So that's the difference. And which were introduced to who? By the Romans. They knew one thing. They knew how to fight. They weren't too smart. But they took over by might. They didn't take over by intellect. No, they weren't smart at all. They dumb as a bag of rocks. But they knew how to fight. They practiced what? Defeating people. Fighting. Simple. Ethiopia is the only continent on Africa that wasn't colonized by the white man. They could fight. Only person the white man respected what? Somebody could fight. Okay? And the Romans, at that time, they took over the arm of what? A fight. So they took over. And they perfected what? To be what? Colonists and imperialists, because they can come in and just take over. Okay? I would strongly recommend the reading of a few books as a black person. The Destruction of Black Civilization by one of my favorite writers, Chancellor Williams, for anyone who interested in understanding how effectively this strategy was implemented in Africa and still working to this day. I have spoken with numerous Africans who were told by U.S. State Department officials, white people, on prior visiting to the United States to avoid contact with the blacks. Why? Because they dislike Africans and they will cheat and rob you. You see why the black guys come here, they don't trust us. Okay? That's why. Hold on one second. Excuse me. They had the concept that when Africans come to America, that the Americans will rob them. And, so that whole dynamic keeps us, again, separate. Okay? Divided. So they can keep their people nice and keep us over here. Moving on. Let me wrap this up again. I got one more part to go. This is going to be quick. But the role of the media in white America is harboring feelings of what? Distrust where? Between the Africans and African Americans. It's been going on for a while. And it also partially to blame for the what? That disconnect. Okay? The violence between political factions in South Africa is always referred to what? You ready? In any hood, what? Black on black violence. Okay? All right. Yet, the murder of whites in Eastern Europe is continually referred to as an ethnic conflict. Oh, it ain't white on white? No, it's ethnic. The battles which have taken place between the European nations have never been referred to as white on white violence or crime. What they call it? Ready? Close not on this one. It's going to be a quickie. They called it World War One and World War II. And on their own homeland, Civil War. So they always at war. One way or another, it's a war with them. And I'm going to try to sneak another question in. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Let's go. I got another question. That answered that question for the Africans responsible for their own enslavement. It was always that issue of what? Prisoners, not their own family, not their family. They didn't do that. So that answered that question. Here's another question. This is a good one. Okay, for my Christians, I love you. But as a Christian, how am I to respond to the information regarding the Nile Valley origins of Christianity? Dun, 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 dun. I like this one. I have been told all my life that the Bible is the Word of God. Jesus in the red. And that Jesus died for our sins. Now I am hearing that the Bible was derived from Egyptian texts and that the story of Jesus and Mary is patterned after Aset and Haru. There are even those who claim that even the Ten Commandments have come from something called the Nevi Confessions of Mayat. What and who am I to believe? A concerned Christian. Let me help you out with that one. I like this one. This is a good question. But first of all, you got to understand, this guy y'all call King James, white guy, he got a version of the Bible, and he printed back in 1611, 77 years after the Church of England broke away from the Vatican. This Bible served as the official translation for most of the English-speaking people, Protestants, for more than 300 years, and during the early years of its existence, women and the poor were forbidden from reading the Bible under penalty of death. Did you know that, Christians? Or you diehard Christians? So see, all this information that they don't tell you about. They don't want you to know that part. All right. And the stuff about King James, we ain't going there. I ain't wasting my time on that nonsense. But now the question is, from what you said, who am I to believe? Answer. The topic is always a sensitive one when you're dealing with people who have their belief and have been raised in a Christian environment. My pastor asked him, how did he stay in that book? He said, Brother Wright, that's all I know. I ain't got a problem with that. Not a bit. Okay? But many have been taught to believe that it is sinful to question the Bible. And they accept the entire book at face value. No woman had a hand in writing that book. Did you know that, Christians? They didn't respect the women enough that Johnny had no say-so. Nothing to do with women in the Bible. Okay? Y'all at the Last Supper. Okay? But what must be remembered is that there are currently more than 140 different versions of your Holy Bible that was written by God. And the interpretation of specific texts varies greatly. If you are going to study the Bible, or any book for that matter, you must first investigate the background and the motives of the author who writing the book. I'll give you the information. Right now, we're in the information age. Rather than hide the information, they just flood you with information, good and bad, right and wrong. So you can't make a good decision again. They put you back on the defensive. But you have millions of people who read the King James Version of the Bible, but few, if any, know anything at all about the author, King James. He had sex with his mom. He killed his mom. Who was he? How was he? What kind of person was he? They don't want to hear that. He wrote demonic. He wrote a book by the devil. All those things is information that's for everybody. I don't just go get seeking information. It's information for everybody to find out. I ain't getting nothing special. And what motivated him to undertake such an important task, one religious scholar has stated what? That King James was a man who would make Adolf Hitler look like Santa Claus. Adolf Hitler, ain't he the bad guy that tried to exterminate the Jews? So he wasn't a good guy? No, he wasn't. What, but you telling me King James, who wrote the Bible, wasn't a good guy? If this is a fact, then what will happen to people who accept this King James version of the Bible as the truth? Dun 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 dun. Scooby-Doo. Ruh-roh. This questions must be asked. Why? Because a person's concept of religion is too important, his belief system, to leave it in the hands of just anybody. It is a historical fact that the same people who have been responsible, listen now, for interpreting translating the Bible have also been involved in the enslavement and the murder of millions of Africans and Native Americans. Did you know that, Christians? Most of the images associated with biblical personalities have been portrayed as European when they were known to have been people of color. Did you know that, Christians? There is a very strong movement within Black, Catholic, Baptist, and Methodist churches to what? Reclaim and get the truth from the African origins of Christianity. Uh-oh. This is the correct thing to do. Why? I've been lying. Come on, man. Correct it. Stop the lie. We know it's a lie. That's why. Every biblical scholar all agree with this fact that Jesus the Christ was a person of color. But most ministers will refuse to acknowledge this fact and reality for what? For fear of what? Reaction from the congregation. If I tell them the truth, they're not going to like it. So biblical scholars cannot agree on what? The date of the birth of Jesus the Christ. Why? But they know he was not born on December 25th. What? That date was agreed upon. What you mean? What are you talking about, Willis? That date was agreed upon by the bishops who attended the Nicene Conference in 332 ACE, when the boy Byzantine, okay, because it commemorated the birth of the Son. Hello, S-U-N, Son, and the Son of God, thousands of years before the birth of Jesus the Christ. Very few people are aware of the fact that this conference even took place. Why not? And that it determined what doctrines would be incorporated in that book that John say God wrote into the Christian religion. This is not to suggest, well, that the Christianity is a false religion. No, we wouldn't suggest that. But one must be aware of the influence that African religious thought played in its development. There is a great deal of symbolisms and allegory and mythological stories that's in the Bible. One must learn to distinguish. They're not literal. They're mythological and allegorical, and distinguish between the information, which should be taken literally, here we go, and that which must be evaluated for what? Greater understanding. That's esoteric message. The only viable solution to this quandary is to what? Read and study all related information. It is impossible for a person to read just one book and consider themselves all knowledgeable on the subject matter. I tell you, I got a library full of books. Masonic information, zodiac information, everything. Stem to stern. Okay? I got a bunch of books. My pastor had one book. One of the reasons African people continue to suffer to this day is because they still worship the God that was assigned to them by who? Their former slave masters. Just as the African involvement in the historical development of world civilization has incorporated into the world's major religious systems have also been forgotten, human beings have used many names to identify what? The omnipresent force which has been referred to as God, Neteru, Netetru, Neteru, Netru, Nebercha, in Egypt. Names such as Amen, Amun, Jehovah, Allah, Buddha, Shango, Orango, and everybody else, and many others. My favorite, my boy Legba, other have been used by people to what? To describe their special relationship to God. And that's the inalienable right there. That's what your inalienable right to have belief, whatever you choose. That's it. But it is wrong to deny people their right to believe in their concept of a creator, and it is a sinful act to enslave them in the name of God. And any people, more likely the white people, who would engage in such an activity are unworthy of what we call the heavenly reward which they claim to seek. I told you that white man's soul is living is heaven right here on the backs of the blacks. So he has no heaven to go to. When he died, he going straight to the graveyard. That's it. End of the game for him. Okay? He ain't even worthy of a heavenly nothing. That's a lesson. I know I've said at the end, but I've been watching this for a long time, and I agree 100%. I just did a lesson about why they don't go to heaven. They got heaven right here now. We catching hell. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, right? Because I got another Q&A coming up. So I'm enjoying it. I hope you are. And we're closing out right there because may you all live to be 100. Me, 100 minus a day. So I know that my right thinkers who enjoy my Q&A, getting answers to questions that they really need to know for themselves have passed away. I got you. I'll be right back.